we have some amazing creators to talk about Deadpool in the aughts. First up, of course, is Deadpool co-creator Fabian Nicieza, who continues to join us. Fabian had a Deadpool mask with him, but I saw it. Where did you still have that mask, Fabian? Yeah, look at that.
It's my Lucha Libre mask. I got it in Mexico City as a gift from a fan, and I can't breathe in it.
Okay, so good. Please keep it off, and we'll keep rolling along. We also have.
I can't breathe it.
We'll also have new panelists joining us. Writer Gail Simone. Hi, Gail.
Hey, hi everybody.
Yay!
Deadpool
and
party.
Writer,
yay!
Yay! And writer Daniel Way. Hello, Daniel.
Hi there.
I like that. The clapping. You guys are so polite and wonderful and welcoming. This is the way it should be done when we're talking about Deadpool, who is the most polite boy in the universe. All right. Let's start talking about some Deadpool in the 2000s. Gail, I want to start with you. When you come onto the book, there's definitely the book, gets like a more return to the comedic side of things. When you're starting to think about Deadpool, going back to the comedy aspects of the character in the book, what did you draw on at that time when you were writing the character?
Well, first of all, when I first got the call to do it, I basically had a parody column online. I hadn't really written any mainstream comics. I'd written some Simpsons comics. And I got a call from Joe Quesada, who was talking about Deadpool, and he said, "We just want to make it laugh out loud funny again. Would you be interested in pitching? You know who Deadpool is, right? You're familiar with his character." And I was like, "Oh, yes, I love Deadpool. He's my favorite." And I really, no, I didn't. And this is like, at this point, I've written probably close to 700 comics, and I've written probably 2 or 3 at that point. And so I started asking my friends online to tell me a little bit about Deadpool. And I got like from some really talented writers, things like he's Bugs Bunny with gun, and previously there'd been more of a crime story sort of vibe to it. And I started going back and sampling a little bit and taking a look at it and thinking, this is a character who, has this healing factor, but he also has this horrible disease. So the humor has got to come from the pain is what I felt. And so I love dark humor. I love everything about Deadpool's character in terms of, I like to write the weird characters, the characters that have a lot of action and have something really different. So that's basically kind of where I started. I just want to make sure that we could laugh at him and laugh with him, but there was still this underlying darkness to his character to balance that out a little bit. And that was my approach at that time. But basically the goal was to, make it as funny as I could. And at the time, Deadpool was actually being in danger of being canceled. And I was a new writer, and this was kind of like a last, let's see what happens kind of thing. And so I think I got away with a lot of things that maybe if it had like been a really well-established high-selling book at the time would have. So I got to write episodes or issues where, he was rediscovering his manhood for the whole entire issue, and just funny, weird crap all the time going on in that book.
What an elegant way to put it, Gail.
Exactly. Fabian, you having originated Wade's stories back in 1991, you come back to the character in this decade, and you talked a little bit about this when we were talking with Joe Kelly. But what is that like when you come back to the character and he's gone through stories with other creators? He's developed different things. What was that like for you coming back to him, and what did you think about what was different for him for you?
Well, I got a call out of the blue from editor Mike Martz asking me if I'd be interested in pitching a Cable and Deadpool book. And I was a little confused at first because I thought he was talking like a split book, like Tales of Suspense back in the 60s, 10 pages of Captain America and 10 pages of Iron Man. And he said, no, together. And I said, like The Odd Couple? And he goes, yes, exactly. And I go, oh, okay, yeah, sure, that'll work. And I hung up the phone. I remember to this day looking out the window of my office in the house I was in at the time. And I said, how the hell am I going to do a book with these two in it without them killing each other? And then I go, oh, okay, there's 5-6 issues right there. So I wrote it cold. It's the first time I did full script, because before that I was doing plot first, predominantly for Marvel. So back then they had switched to full script. And I decided consciously not to read what had come before, for better or worse, because I hadn't written them for a while, because frankly, the last time I was going to write them did not end well for me, because I was supposed to write the second miniseries, and there was a lot of editorial things that happened that prevented me from being able to do that. It had left a very bad taste in my mouth about Deadpool. So I never read Joe's run. I never read, Priest's run. I never read Gail's run. And I just wrote the first 3-4 issues the way I thought I wanted him to be. And that was it. So whatever the first few issues of Cable and Deadpool are, it's pretty much unfiltered me. And then I went back and started reading previous runs, which I really didn't want to do, because anytime you read previous runs and they're good, you get really jealous and you think very insecure, and you think you're never going to hold up to them. Deadpool rediscovering his manhood. I'm never going to top that. So you're like, but I did read a lot of the earlier work, and it made me realize, actually, oh, okay, I'm on track. I guess I understand this guy. It's been over 10 years since I wrote him, but I'm okay. I'm good to go. And that was it. Once I felt good to go, once I felt confident, it was a pleasure to write that book, because, like Gail said, we existed in a bit of a corner where, for the most part at that time, Marvel's editorial regime, I'm not even sure they knew they were publishing a book called Cable and Deadpool. So we got to do a lot. The only way Marvel knew that we were publishing the book is every month the lawyers would ask us to have to change stuff. That was the way that I knew Marvel was aware we were publishing the book. And that was also a testament to what everything's changed little by little. We're able to do more. We're able to, quote unquote, get away with more, which for a character like Deadpool is very important, because it lets you keep pushing some humor boundaries that are worth pushing, because you get a little bit more raw, visceral humor that way. Editorially, they really evolved in the aughts into the early 10s when Daniel was writing it to really accommodate a lot more than they ever would have back in the 90s.
Fabian, you're wonderful. You gave me a great segue to talk to Daniel about jumping on to Deadpool in 2009 or so. Daniel, what did you want to, what was your perspective on trying to come onto Deadpool, who has at that point, almost 20 years of history, and make the character, make the book your own? Where were you thinking with the character at that point?
Well, really what I wanted was, I wanted to take advantage of the situation we were in, which was kind of similar to what Gail had going on earlier, is that when Axel Alonso and I pitched the idea of doing a new Deadpool series, I mean, it wasn't even a lukewarm response. It was just luckily I had another book at a time that was selling really high. So they said, okay, just so long as the other one isn't late. And even then they would only approve it for 3 issues at a time. But the idea was that I wanted to just be able to do anything with it. Again, like what Gail did, because it was a character that could take advantage of that fact. He wasn't really locked into anything. I guess I wanted to show more aspects of the character, the crazy zany stuff, but also the tactical side, and that there was a strategy under all of this, tell some jokes. It's a great vehicle for, kind of slipping jokes under the radar and doing a lot of subversive fun that you wouldn't normally get to do in a straight up hero book. But yeah, I mean, in all honesty, my mandate was to just make the Deadpool book that I always wanted. And since for all we knew, there was no audience, and I would be the only audience, I just kind of indulged it.
That's great. Gail, because you came into the character kind of cold, but then you sort of developed and you were able to push those boundaries, do some really fun stuff. what did you, how do you, when you start with the character, you think about him in one way. When you go on and you start to write these stories and develop them in really cool ways, how do you feel about the character later on? Does, like as you're pushing the boundaries, do you feel anything different about the character as you go along?
I just felt there was this incredible amount of creative freedom, which doesn't, come a lot sometimes. So that I was so appreciative of. I was so appreciative that I could tell a story. And the cool thing about the Deadpool audience is that they didn't really care who was writing it. If you were funny and you stayed true to the character, it was all good. And so I felt probably the most supported by the readers while writing Deadpool than any other comic that I've written, at least. And for that to be one of the first mainstream made it's a huge difference in my career path. But with Deadpool, I just started discovering things like I would think, well, he does have some things in common with Captain America, which sounds like, whoa, what do you mean in common with Captain America? But Deadpool hates bullies, and so does Captain America, but they deal with them in two different ways. And Deadpool's likely to shoot a bully, whereas Captain America might try other more appropriate methods, And so I just kind of played with that a little bit and the fact that if you're not afraid of dying and you're not afraid if you lose an arm, you're not afraid of that. You're just not afraid of anything. What would you be like? I mean, the freedom of that and the freedom of that with the character and with stories is the best. So I just felt as I, the years have gone by and I've come back and I've written short Deadpool things, through time, I have come to appreciate what the readers get out of Deadpool, almost more than how I feel about it, because they bring their own stuff to it and the way they interpret his character and how they use him to motivate different things that they do in their own lives. It's super cool. I have a million stories about that.
Fabian, you've said before that Cable and Deadpool is some of the work that you're most proud of on the character. Why is that?
Part of it was the longevity of the run. I got to write 50 issues. Even at that point at Marvel, it wasn't happening that often to have that kind of a run on a book. I had tremendous freedom. Like I said, I wasn't really kidding when I said that I don't know if Marvel knew they were publishing the book. That really opens you up to a lot of freedom. Our sales were never great, but they were never terrible either. They were oddly consistently solid pretty much all the way through. The numbers never went much higher or much lower, which also gave me a little bit of freedom because it really meant that you had an audience. That audience was going to be there. And you could try some things. And I just think that the dichotomy of the two characters, the oddness of the two characters together, I think brought a lot of good things out of both of them. I think that we went a long way in those 50 issues to really reestablishing kind of who each of them needed to be moving forward, and I think it worked because everything that came after that, especially with Deadpool, just continued to go higher and higher. It was interesting back then. That was the nascent YouTube time. That was the beginnings of Twitter and social media to a great extent, and that's when cosplay videos were starting to hit. And I'd be joking with Riley Brown, the artist at the time on Cable and Deadpool, that there's a cosplay YouTube video that has 40,000 hits, and we go, crap, we're only selling 36,000 copies, right? That video is getting more people watching it. A year later, that video had 1 million hits. And a couple years later into Daniel's run, that same video had 14 million hits. Deadpool's rise wasn't never ever really necessarily reflected through comic sales. It was reflected through his social media presence, and the elevation of the character through that presence went a long way towards making a teenage audience ready and primed for like when the movie came out. So I found being a part of that kind of at the beginning, watching it happen through our letters pages and through social media on the internet, and watch it continue to take off. And it was wonderful that it really took off for Daniel, because after they canceled Cable and Deadpool, and I got signed a contract to write for DC, Daniel gets all the bounty of getting to write the top selling Deadpool book. So it was really actually heartwarming to see, because I felt that I felt that we treaded water in a way for 50 issues, but guess what? They didn't drown. They kept breathing. They kept going, and I felt really good about that.
And there's some good ass comics anyway. So everybody go read them on Marvel Unlimited. Those of you watching, we're going to get into some fan questions. Before we do that, Daniel, I want to ask, you were able to do a lot of really cool stuff with Deadpool. Was there anything you were particularly fond of or proud of bringing into Deadpool's canon, his world, or bringing him into the larger part of the Marvel universe, which I think really kicks off with what you did?
That right there. My first instinct when I started writing it is I wanted to use all of these kind of Deadpool, characters from Deadpool universe, the characters that he was always around, Blind Al and Weasel and Cable and Hydra Bob. But I knew that if I wanted to give the book a chance, we had to borrow an Axel Alonso saying we needed to weave him back into the Marvel tapestry. And the best way to do that was to get the character involved in, a big crossover. So we reached out to Brian Bendis, who he and I, had talked about. We had done some good things together with Wolverine for House of M, and I just asked him. I said, "Is there something that, like a task, the Deadpool that we can assign to Deadpool in that story that I can kind of play off of?" And he just kind of threw something at me, and that became really the trajectory of almost the first year's worth of stories. And it brought him, back into the fold of the Marvel universe. And then I would like accent it with, cameo appearances from these other characters who I and a lot of the kind of long-term hardcore fans definitely wanted to see. But I think we also wanted to see him kind of regain his stature, in the bigger picture. And so, yeah, I'm kind of happy that I was able to facilitate that. And obviously, you can only push it so far, and then someone, fans, other creators have to pick it up and run with it. And luckily that happened.
Yes. We do have a bunch of fan questions. Thank you to everybody who's watching, who's submitting questions, but we have time. I think we only have time for one, and this one comes from Otto Talks, and it's to all three of you. The question is, would you say that writing Deadpool takes extra work compared to other comics? Is it maybe because of the constant need for jokes, or, and this is me ad-libbing, or is Otto wrong? Is he just easy because this is a character that comes easily to you? Daniel, let's start with you. What do you think?
It's the easiest thing I've ever written. Seriously,
there you go.
I never turned in outlines. I'll just sit down and, it happened real fast.
Gail, how about you? Sorry.
Oh, no, I was done.
It's the one character where there's, not that many rules. So that's my kind of character to work with. And I think I honestly could write Deadpool stories for the rest of my life and not run out, just because you can go anywhere you want with it. And, I've been like in Shanghai, China at the first Western comic convention they had there. And there was like a huge group of Deadpool cosplayers there. And they were mostly girls, and they had all these different versions of Deadpool, and just something about him sparks the imagination to such a degree that you just feel limitless. And I know there's certain things that, maybe wouldn't work as well, but I haven't found them yet. And I just feel like you can tell any kind of story with Deadpool just about that you want, just because, you aren't limited by the structure and the rules like you might be with a Superman or a Batman. And you also can push. The whole point of Deadpool is to push the boundaries. And that's my favorite thing ever as a writer. So, I'm there for it. Weird, dark, push boundaries, funny, that's the best.
Right on. All right, Fabian, take us home. What do you think?
When I'm writing Deadpool, it means I don't have to worry about paying for therapist bills. It is the ability to flush out every single wrong thing that's in my brain, and not only have fun with that, but get paid for it too. So I anytime I snap back to writing him, I just wrote him for the Nerdy 30, and I hadn't written him, in 8 years. I don't even know, 7 years. And from page one, boom, there you go. It's unfortunately a very, very comfortable fit because all of us obviously have something a little bit wrong with us if we're able to so easily access Deadpool's mind.
Yeah. Thank you for
I feel
plugging
like
the
it's
Nerdy.
freeing to write Deadpool.
It's very liberating.
Yeah.
In a wrong way. In a way that society wouldn't approve of.
But we'll get to see more of all three of you, your takes on Deadpool in the Nerdy 30 book. Thank you to Daniel, Gail, and Fabian for being here to talk about Deadpool in the 2000s.
You're welcome!